to today's class. Today we will be working with the intermediate, Headway Plus. We're going to be looking at Unit 3, where amongst other things we look at art and literature. I'd like you to turn to page 26 in your books, and this is where we will be working today. We will be looking at the life and work of Agatha Christie, and we will be looking at the life and work of Ernest Hemingway. Who of you has heard of either of these two people? Who is or was Agatha Christie?
Agatha Christie, didn't she write the Poirot books?
Yes, she did. She wrote many detective stories. I think she was back in the 1930s or 40s, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if she's still alive, but I'm sure we will find out as we go through the text here. Ernest Hemingway. Who's heard of him? Do we know anything about him?
He wrote The Sun Also Rises.
Yes, he did. He wrote many well-known books, in fact, and we'll be learning a lot more about him when we go through the information on Ernest Hemingway.
I actually met the actor who plays Poirot,
Oh, did you?
David Suchet.
Uh-huh.
And I was in Tower Hill in London, and it's a very nice part of London, and it's where there's a lot of ships that dock there. It's called St. Catherine Docks, or is it St. Catherine's Dock? I'm not sure. But anyway, there's all these restaurants, and there's one called Moulin Rouge. And I went into this Moulin Rouge restaurant on a Sunday morning, and I had some coffee and croissant, and I heard the voice. I didn't recognize him, I heard the voice. He has a very distinctive voice, and he was talking about amateur dramatics, and I thought, that sounds like Poirot. And I just looked, and it was him. But he had dark glasses on, a cap and a scarf, and he was talking to his wife. And so that's my claim to fame. And as I went to leave the restaurant, I couldn't open the door because the door was stuck. And this little petite Polish waitress opened the door very easily. And I just laughed and I said, that is so typical of me. And poor David Suchet's wife, she was looking at me laughing, so I couldn't get out. This little tiny girl could get out of the restaurant. So that's my claim to fame with regard to Agatha Christie's character, Poirot.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us, Paul. Well done. Okay, we are looking at two writers. Who are or were the most famous writers in your country? Lou.
Mark Twain.
Mm-hmm.
Very famous American writer.
He's no longer alive.
No, he's not.
Paul, famous writer in your country?
Well, I was going to say George Bernard Shaw, but he was a playwright, wasn't he? But
He was a
Agatha,
playwright.
yeah, but Agatha Christie is one of the most famous.
He's probably one of the most famous,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I would say so.
And I used to live not far from George Bernard Shaw.
Oh,
But
really?
he lived in the countryside, near Welling, near Dixwell, around that area.
Mm-hmm.
And here's just an interesting fact. Nick Faldo, who has since received a knighthood for his golfing prowess,
Yes.
a famous golfer, he won I think the American Open on 2 successive occasions. But he actually purchased George Bernard Shaw's old house. So he lived in that same house for a number of years before he then sold it on. You know.
Wow. So you've been hobnobbing with the rich and famous.
Not me personally. I don't think they want me, but still, that's another story.
But thanks for sharing that, Paul. We're going to read about the lives of Agatha Christie and Ernest Hemingway. And we will discuss the following questions. Why are they famous? What nationality were they? Which century were they born in? Do you know the names of any of their works? And do you know anything about their lives? Keep those questions in mind as we, or rather as you.
I heard that Agatha Christie, she suffered from writer's block on one occasion, and she disappeared, I think for about 6 weeks, and they found she was in Brighton, living in a guest house. She just went down there to get away from the stress of writing, and she didn't tell anyone, so she was effectively disappeared for 6 weeks, I think. But then she suddenly turned up. I've got a sneaking suspicion that this article, that this is going to be in this article. I think it probably is.
And of course, I think writer's block is something that most authors suffer from on occasion. When they're sitting in front of their word processor in the mornings and just nothing comes to mind. Or they type a page, they read through it, delete it, type it again, and keep on trying and trying. I think this is an occupational hazard. Paul, could I ask you to read the first paragraph here for us, please?
Yeah, I'm going to have to walk closer to the board.
I could possibly make it bigger.
No, it's okay. Agatha Christie, sorry, I'll start again, yeah. Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie is possibly the world's most famous detective story writer. She wrote 78 novels, and her sales, 4 billion copies of her novels, outnumber those of William Shakespeare. However, behind her 4,680,000 words was a painfully shy woman whose life was often lonely and unhappy.
Thank you, Paul. Lou, could I ask you to start the next paragraph, please?
She was born in 1890 in Devon, the third child of Clarissa and Frederick Miller, and grew into a beautiful and sensitive girl. She didn't go to school, but was educated at home by her parents. Her father taught her mathematics through stories and games, and her mother encouraged her to write her own stories. Unfortunately, her father died in 1901 when she was 11, and both she and her mother were grief-stricken.
Paul, would you read the last part for us, please?
When World War I came in 1914, she became a nurse in a hospital dispensary, which proved very useful to her in her later career. Many of the murders in her books were carried out by a clever use of drugs and poisons, showing how much she had learnt about them as a nurse.
Thank you. Lou, could I ask you to read this portion for us?
She wrote her first detective novel, The Mysterious Affair, at Styles in 1920. In it, she introduced Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective who appeared in many subsequent novels. Her other main detective was an elderly spinster called Miss Marple, who was based on Agatha's grandmother and her several friends. Christie's stories have ingenious plots and keep the reader guessing who the murderer is till the very end of the story.
Let's just look at what we have read so far about her before we continue. She wrote how many novels?
78.
78 novels. About how long do you think it takes to write a novel, to write one novel?
Well, wouldn't that depend on the writer themselves?
It would depend on the writer, but I suppose you could say, I don't know, 2 months if you go fairly quickly, I would guess.
Some people write only one book in their lives, which is usually a biography. So they spend their lives working on one biography.
Yeah. So if you think of the number of novels she wrote, the amount of time she must have spent dreaming up plots and putting them down on paper.
Well, perhaps, do you think this is why she was lonely and unhappy? Because of this?
Yes, quite possibly, because she was most likely an introvert who kept to herself and sat in front of her typewriter. They didn't have word processors in those days. Or maybe she even wrote by hand. So it was an immense amount of work she did. 4,680,000 words. That's a huge amount of literature that she wrote down. She was a beautiful and sensitive girl, they say, and she was educated at home. Her father educated her with games and stories, and the mother encouraged her writing. Where did she get many of her ideas from for her plots? What work did she do during the war?
Nursing.
Yes. She was a nurse, and what did many of her stories contain? What methods of murder were in her stories?
Drugs, poisons.
Uh-huh.
What are poisons, teacher?
A poison is not an item, it is a liquid or solid that if eaten can cause you to become sick or die.
Like a toxic potion.
A toxic potion indeed. A nice way of putting it. A poetic way of putting it.
Yes.
It makes you wonder if she ever experimented with any of those methods on her patients. Do you think she would have, Lou?
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah. I think that's
Are you trying to say that Agatha Christie poisoned her patients? That's highly unlikely.
I'm simply speculating. Since she included all of these things in her plots,
Well,
do you not think that
yesterday-
possibly she was tempted to experiment to see how successful various methods would be?
Well, yesterday we were talking about Sherlock Holmes, the character, the fictional character, Sherlock Holmes. And did you know he was actually a drug user, and that's how he was able to deduct the methods used by criminals to commit their crimes.
Yes, he was addicted to heroin, if I'm not mistaken.
He was high.
And he was really functioning at a high level.
But I don't believe for 1 minute that Agatha Christie was using the same kind of poisons and stuff on her patients when she was in the war.
It does seem rather unlikely, doesn't it?
It does.
But the thought just crossed my mind, and I thought I would hear your thoughts about that. I guess that was her personal or her early years. Her life as a writer. Lou, would you read this section for us, please?
She wrote her first detective novel, The Mysterious Affair, Styles, in 1920. In it, she introduced Hercule Poirot, the Belgian...
Oh, sorry, you've already read this portion.
Yes, I have.
Sorry, her personal life is what I meant you to.
Can we have a look at some of these words?
Yes.
What about the previous one? Okay.
Let us look at some of the words that perhaps you're not familiar with or which we don't use that often. What is a novel?
A short story written in paperback form. I
Yes.
think.
It's generally a fictional story. I don't think it's necessarily short. You can get some pretty lengthy novels, if I'm not mistaken. But they're normally fictional stories.
What does it mean, teacher? Painfully shy.
Painfully shy means that she was shy to the point where she could not function in the way another person would function. In other words, she would be if she met somebody, she would probably look down and she'd sort of back away and try and get away. She didn't like being in crowds or mixing with people very much.
Teacher, where is Devon?
That's in England.
Do you know where?
Sort of around about the middle area somewhere.
It's in the southwest.
Ah, that's what I meant to say. Correct.
Yes, the southwest of England.
In the southwest of England. Correct.
And what does it mean, teacher? Sensitive. What does that mean? It says she was a sensitive girl.
Sensitive can have various meanings. In this case, it probably means that anything that was said to her really affected her. So if somebody said something nasty to her, she'd probably feel very hurt and very sad about it. And if somebody paid her a compliment, she would probably blush brightly and go and hide away somewhere.
Okay. And what does it mean her mother encouraged her? What's that, encouraged her?
If you encourage somebody, you point out to them the good things that they are doing, how well they are doing, so that they feel the urge to continue doing more of the same. If I say to you, Paul, you've been doing really well in these classes, I like the work you do, you speak very well, and your written work is excellent, that would be encouraging you.
In this text, there's some vocabulary here. It says that she and her mother were both grief-stricken. What does that mean, grief-stricken?
Grief means when you are very sad about something. When you are stricken by something, as for instance a disease, it means that you are suffering from this thing. So they were extremely sad, and they were almost incapable of functioning normally. They felt so sad about the death of her father.
What is a hospital dispensary? Is that like a pharmacy?
What do you think, Lou? Would you say Paul has got the correct definition of a dispensary?
I believe so.
Yes. It is like the pharmacy of a hospital. Do you know the difference between something that is poisonous and something that is venomous? People often talk about poisonous snakes. Is that a correct description?
No. Venomous.
Yes.
They excrete venom through the fangs in the mouth. It's like the teeth of the snake. These are the fangs.
Correct.
And from that they can get the venom, and they actually extract it. They take the venom from the snake and they use it as an antidote.
Yes.
Because a tiny amount of it can protect someone.
I've actually watched them milking snakes in South Africa.
Oh.
And they have a jar with a sort of a rubber covering over the top of it, and they get the snake to strike onto the jar, and you see the venom squirting out of the fangs into the jar.
Yes.
That's really quite fascinating.
So venom is different from poison, which Agatha Christie was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So poison is like a potion, which is mixed together, which is lethal.
Yes.
Kill you.
A poison is something that if you swallow it, you become ill or die. Venomous is something that excretes poison. So a snake would be poisonous if you ate it and you then died from eating it. But people do not generally do that sort of thing.
Teacher,
Yes, Paul.
so Hercule Poirot.
It means in that first novel of hers, The Mysterious Affair, for the first time she spoke of this Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot. And for the first time people got to read about him, got to hear about him, and became familiar with his way of doing things, his appearance with his big moustache, his really disliking being called a Frenchman. He always insisted that he was Belgian, not French. So she introduced him. People got to know him.
Okay, and what's an elderly spinster? Elderly spinster, what's that?
A spinster is a lady who has never gotten married. Normally, probably over 40 years of age. You wouldn't call a young girl a spinster so often, although the term would apply to her. Elderly means getting on in years. An elderly person would be possibly in their 60s or 70s.
So, a young woman, if she's not married, you wouldn't say a young spinster. You'd just call her, like Miss so-and-so?
Yes, you probably could quite correctly call her a spinster because she is unmarried.
But it's unusual.
But it would be unusual, yes. Normally you would refer to a young girl as being single.
And what is it? Ingenious plots. What's that?
Oh, that's a nice term, isn't it? Lou, do you have any idea what ingenious might mean?
Very intelligent.
Yes. Well thought out and well put together, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, the different parts of the plot at the end all fit together.
But what's the plot? What does that mean?
The plot is the story that she tells in the book. And typically she would tell you a little bit of information here and another little piece of information somewhere else. And if your mind does not work in the same way as Hercule Poirot's mind did, you'll probably be fairly confused by the time you get towards the end of the story.
Could we say that we have an ingenious teacher?
Oh, absolutely. I would go along with that 100%, and I would encourage everybody else to
I suppose you
spread the
would.
word.
Yeah.
Keep going, Paul. You're doing well.
Well, I was interested. What does it mean, murderer? What's that, murderer?
A murderer is a person who kills somebody else.
Really?
Illegal.
That's a murderer?
A murderer is a person who illegally kills another person.
What do you mean illegally?
Some countries, if somebody is found guilty of certain crimes, they are executed by the state.
Well, in Saudi Arabia, they're executed by the sword.
In Saudi Arabia, they lop the bad guys' heads off. That is not murder, that is execution.
Really?
It comes to the same thing in that you're taking somebody's life. But the one is state sanctioned. It means that the state allows it, and in fact performs it, in which case it is called an execution. But if I were to go outside tonight and rob somebody and kill them in the process of robbing them, that would be murder. And that would make me a murderer. This can become quite a complicated debate. Many people have many different thoughts about that. Anything else, Paul?
I'd like to have a look at the next paragraph, if it's possible.
I think we can. Let's read it and then we will discuss it. Lou, could you read about her personal life for us, please?
In 1914, at the beginning of the war, she married Archibald Christie. But the marriage was unhappy. It didn't last, and they divorced in 1926. It was a very difficult time for her, as her much-loved mother had died earlier that year. Agatha suffered a nervous breakdown, and one night she abandoned her car and mysteriously disappeared.
I believe this is what you were talking about, Paul.
Yeah, I was just thinking, she married this gentleman, his name was Archibald. Did you know Archibald was a very common name in those days? In fact, he was a famous actor in the 30s, and his name was Archibald Leach.
I did not know that.
Yes, because he was known as Cary Grant.
Ah, okay. Cary Grant, obviously I've heard of.
Yes.
But not Archibald Leach.
So Archibald, that's what I'm saying, was a very common name. Agatha Christie married this guy, Archibald.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For how long were they married? Did they say what year she got? In 1914 they got married. And in 1926 they got divorced. Paul, will you just read this paragraph and then we'll talk about it?
Yes. Is that from, she went
missing for 11 days.
Okay. She went missing for 11 days and was eventually found in a hotel in Harrogate, in the north of England. Agatha desperately wanted solitude and felt bitter towards the media because the newspapers had given her a hard time over her breakdown and disappearance. She was determined never to let them enter her private life again.
Thank you. So yes, she got married in 1914, and 12 years later she got divorced. However, she had a nervous breakdown. What is a nervous breakdown, Lou?
I think that this is just the author doing a very bad job. In psychology, there's no such thing as nervous breakdown.
Mm-hmm. It's generally referred to as, or people speak of someone having a nervous breakdown, where they are unable to function, they become irrational, they are prone to crying and laughing and mood swings. In other words, just not functioning at the optimal level. But she had a nervous breakdown and she just mysteriously disappeared. Why did she disappear? Why did she do that? Paul?
Because she wanted time on her own. I thought she went to Brighton, but I was wrong. She went to Harrogate. So she just wanted time on her own, away from the media. Was her pestering her, probably about her marriage, when all she wanted to talk about was her books, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and they said the newspapers had given her a hard time over her breakdown and disappearance.
What's a hard time, teacher?
They were not very kind to her, they were nasty, and they were asking questions that were probably too personal to ask a person. Your personal life remains your personal life. And she was determined never to let them enter her private life again. Her final years, please, Lou.
She enjoyed a very happy second marriage to Max Malloy, an archaeologist. She met in Baghdad and married in 1930. Her detective skills were help to him in his excavations in Syria and Iraq. By successfully staying out of the media's spotlight, she ultimately found happiness with her beloved husband. Her best novels were written after 1930, and she continued writing until 1973. Christie was awarded England's highest honor, an OBE, by the Queen in 1971. She died peacefully in 1976.
How old was she when she died? She died in 76. In which year was she born?
1890. She was 86 years old.
Yes.
Teacher, what does OBE mean?
It is an award given by the British Empire, and it stands for Order of the British Empire. And it's when you appear before the Queen and you have a little thing that you kneel on, and she taps you on the shoulder with a sword, which is different to the way they use the sword in Saudi Arabia. And you then have a title.
A title? What's that?
You probably become, I don't know, my lord or my lady or count or countess. I don't know what you are. Oh, you become sir somebody, but you would have become dame or lady, I would imagine.
Yeah, dame, I think, yeah.
I'm not very clued up on British orders.
Don't they call it pomp and gentry?
Quite possibly they do. And her detective skills helped her second husband in his excavations in Syria and Iraq. Because obviously if she could write these sorts of stories, her mind worked in a particular way, in a particular sort of logic, and she could see connections between things that were not obvious to other people. So when he went excavating, you know the term excavating?
No, what's that?
Excavating is what, amongst others, archaeologists do when they go to a site where they believe they will find something, and they carefully dig the soil away from whatever it is they are examining. If it's an old building, they will find the walls and they will carefully dig around the walls and dust them off.
Dust them off? What does that mean, dust them off?
They have brushes and they clean the dirt and the mud and the sand off of whatever it is that they are searching for.
Oh.
Now, her detective skills were a help to him in his excavations. She successfully stayed out of the media spotlight and she stayed away from the press after that. And she was happily married with her second husband. Her best novels were written after 1930, and she continued writing right up until 1973. You can see that the writing was clearly a great passion of hers. Let us go back to the questions that we looked at the beginning. So Lou, why was Agatha Christie famous? For what was she famous?
For writing novels.
She was famous for writing novels. What type of novels?
Detective novels.
Yes, absolutely. What nationality was she?
British.
She was a British lady. In which century was she born?
The 18th century. The 19th century.
19th century, yeah, the end of the 1800s. And Paul, do you know the names of any of her works? Agatha Christie's works?
Poirot.
Well, that was the character in her book. Do you know the name?
Life on the Orient Express.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more famous ones, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've read many of her books. I can't recall any of the names of any of them. Lou, have you read any of her works?
Oh, I know what it was. It's Murder on the Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you read any of her books, Lou?
I'm afraid not. I should.
I read them many years ago, and like I say, I no longer remember the names of any of them. What do we know about her life, Paul?
Oh, she was a very happy child. I think she came from a good family. They educated her at home, I think.
Yes, her father educated her, they say. Or she was home educated, and her father educated her with stories and games.
But she became lonely, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Because of her writing. It's a very solitary, is that the word, teacher? Very solitary thing to do.
Yes, where you're on your own. Do you think she became lonely and withdrew from people because of her writing? Or did she become a writer because she preferred her own company to that of other people?
Oh, it's a very good question, teacher. I think it was because of the writing, but you never know, do you?
What would you think, Lou?
Well, the passage doesn't really give us information on that. I think that's the kind of question I have to answer after talking with her or discussing her life with other people. I'm not sure it's something I can really answer based on the passage.
No, it's pretty much speculation. My own feeling would be is that probably her basic nature was to seek solitude, to want to be on her own, and withdraw into her own mind, and out of that came all of her stories. But that is pure speculation. From this passage we have no way of telling what really happened. Any comments or questions about Agatha Christie and what we have read about her? Okay, then we will stop there for today. And in the next lesson, we will look at another famous writer.
Here are some matching news articles.
We will look at another famous writer, Ernest Hemingway. Which nationality was he? Do we know?
Was he American?
What would you say, Lou?
I believe he was American.
I believe he was, yes. And he had a fairly tragic life, I think, and also a very varied life. He was not a recluse like Agatha Christie was. He was a lot more outgoing, noisy, and in-your-face sort of a person. So next lesson, we will have a look at Ernest Hemingway. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.